Jonson's to the memory of my beloved, the author, Mr. William Shakespeare, and what he hath left us. And if I remember correctly, we left off on line 31, where Jonson says Shakespeare had small Latin and less Greek. Okay? So he goes on. And notice how he puts that. Though thou had small Latin and less Greek. From thence to honor thee I would not seek for names. That is, from thence, from Latin and Greek writers, I would not seek for names, but call forth thundering Aeschylus, Euripides, and Sophocles to us. And you got a footnote about Aeschylus, Euripides, and Sophocles, ancient Greek dramatists. Pacuvius Accius him of Cordova dead, to life again to bury thy buskin tread and shake a stage on. Or, when thy socks were on, and what he's talking about there is the difference between the buskin and the sock. The buskin was a flag that indicated tragedy is playing, and the sock indicated comedy was playing. He said, if when your socks were on, leave thee alone for the comparison of all that insolent Greece or haughty Rome sent forth, or since did from their ashes come. Triumph my Britain. In other words, Britain overcomes Rome and Greece. Thou hast one to show to whom all scenes of Europe homage show. He was not of an age, but for all time. Even though earlier he said, arise, my Shakespeare, soul of the age. Okay? So, he was not of an age, but for all time. And all the muses still were in their prime when, like Apollo, he came forth to warm our ears, or like a Mercury to charm. What does he mean? All the muses were still in their prime. Okay, what else? What's in their prime mean? At their best, young, in their first age. What Jonson is suggesting is now, however, the muses have gotten kind of old and feeble. They enthused Shakespeare, but they're not enthusing anybody else. You're all familiar with that word, right? Enthused, enthusiasm. Anybody know what it literally means? Okay, the end part means inside. Okay, enthuse, not a word we use very often because it's not a word in English, but it is related to Greek deus or theos, God. What it means is in Godded, inspired, to have the God put in you. So when you are enthusiastic about something, it means you're full of God, as it were. Okay? Just a little history of the English language thing. Okay, back to Jonson. All the muses still were in their prime when, like Apollo, he came forth to warm our ears, or like a Mercury to charm. Nature herself was proud of his designs, and joyed to wear the dressing of his lines. Meaning, Shakespeare wove clothing for nature with his words. And nature kind of went, yeah, I kind of like this. This looks really good. Which were so richly spun and woven so fit as since, that is, since Shakespeare, she will vouchsafe no other wit. And by wit, he means writer. And he means himself as well. Okay? The merry Greek tart Aristophanes. Aristophanes wrote comedies and satires. Neat Terence, witty Plautus, now not please. And it's pretty hard, even today in 2013, not when Jonson is writing in 1623, but it's just as hard today in 2013 to find anybody putting on plays by Terence, Plautus, or Aristophanes. Every now and then you'll find a theater in London that puts on one or two of Aristophanes' funnier plays. But antiquated and deserted lie, as they were not of nature's family. That is, because they don't come across as natural, as organic, in other words. They're contrived and artificial. All right? Yet must I not give nature all. He's saying Shakespeare wasn't like most of you, I'm sure. Shakespeare did not just sit down at his desk with a sheet of parchment and his quill and write off Hamlet without any revisions, without any changes, notwithstanding the image of Shakespeare you get in popular film, where Shakespeare's just sitting there, writing on along and throwing things off. No. What does Jonson say? Thy art, my gentle Shakespeare, must enjoy a part. What he means by art is work, labor. Okay? For though the poet's matter nature be, his art doth give the fashion. That is, though the poet's matter, the stuff the poet writes about, is nature, his art, his work, his labor, his technique, if you want, gives it the fashion. Okay, take a play by Shakespeare. A brother kills his brother, marries his dead brother's wife, usurps his dead brother's son's throne. We all know that play as Hamlet. Okay, what does Shakespeare do? He gives it the fashion. He puts it in Elsinore, in Denmark. He creates all kinds of characters, right? He had a source. Shakespeare's not original, really, with anything. He has a source for everything. It's what he does with the source that is so amazing. And that's what Jonson's talking about. For though the poet's matter nature be, his art doth give the fashion. And that he who cast to write a living line must sweat, such as thine are, and strike the second heat upon the muse's anvil. And what's Jonson saying about writing? How many of you, you sat down to write your paper, you sat at your keyboard, you looked at the blank screen for a moment, and then light bulb went off. And you just closed your eyes, and the God within, just inspired you, and you did that what's called divine writing, where you just wrote, hit print, stapled it, and brought it in. Pray God, no. Right? Brian says, yeah, that was me. What is Jonson saying? You wrote, and then you went back and said, oh, that doesn't sound good. And you deleted, and you rewrote, or you scratched out, and rewrote, and maybe rewrote, and maybe rewrote. Okay? Started over, threw it away, shot the computer, bought a new one. In case it became possessed with your drivel before. Okay? No. What does he do? He strikes the second heat upon the muse's anvil. Notice, the muse is the anvil. What's he striking the second heat? The writing is the tempered steel on the anvil that he's trying to shape. Okay? Well, what happens when you try to shape hot steel on an anvil? When you hit that hot steel, what happens to it? It flattens, little hot filings, sparks fly off. Okay? How many of you started, or when you wrote your paper, found out it was longer than it needed to be? Anybody? Okay, we're not. So, turn the same, and himself with it that he thinks to frame. Or for the laurel he may gain a scorn. That is, if you don't work hard, you won't gain the laurel. See, Jonson is saying something about writers. Now, I didn't mention this before, but in 1616, Benjamin Jonson published a volume of his works. And he called it The Works of Benjamin Jonson. Thank you. Okay. It was a very original title at the time. And I mean that seriously. And here's why. Nobody prior to Jonson had called writing work. For him, this was his job. For his father, back-breaking, finger-callousing, bricklaying was his job. Now, I've done mortar and stonework when I was in college. It's fun. Writing papers is a hell of a lot easier than slinging 50-pound buckets of mortar up scaffolding. Mordor. Soul-killing work. So Jonson said, look what I'm doing. I'm working. As he sits there with his little quill and, writes poems and plays. All right? Why? A good poet's made as well as born. Made. They have to work it. Now, if you're Samuel Jonson, those of you go on and take the second part of this course, hopefully you'll read some Samuel Jonson. Samuel Jonson was one of those writers, like John Milton, who I just hate. For the simple reason, he didn't have to revise. Samuel Jonson literally sat down and would write out drafts perfect. One draft. He did this with Rasselas or A Tale of Abyssinia. He had a guy banging on the door, waiting for the sheets of paper to set it in print. He's sitting there finishing it, handing it to his servant, who then takes it to the door, gives it to the printer. The printer runs off, starts setting in type. Jonson finishes the next page, on like that. John Milton dictated Paradise Lost to his daughter because he was blind when he wrote it. So where did he write it? He didn't revise. It's disgusting. It's unfair. Okay? So, a good poet's made as well as born, and such wert thou. Okay? Notice your little gloss down at the bottom. Jonson, in fact, seems to have resented the ease with which Shakespeare wrote. See his comments in the Conversations with Drummond and Timber, etc., etc. Conversations with Drummond is a related series of conversations that Ben Jonson had with William Drummond, a Scottish poet, where Jonson talks about a lot of other poets. Talks about John Donne, for example. He says, John Donne, for not keeping accent, deserved hanging. And by not keeping accent, he means Donne didn't write in the iambic pentameter. It wasn't nice and smooth and flowing. Okay? Donne's syntax kind of gets all weird. Right? So, look how the Father's face lives in his issue. Jonson seems to be saying there, you want to know who Shakespeare was? Look at the poems and plays. Look at the plays in the first folio. Now, you have all kinds of people who are saying, yeah, but the Shakespeare from Stratford-on-Avon didn't really write that stuff. So is Jonson here, giving a little clue to this conspiracy? Saying, no, it's not really him. Look elsewhere. You want to see him, look in his issue. Even so, the race of Shakespeare's mind and manners brightly shines and is well turned in true filed lines. Seems to me he is saying the man from Stratford is the man in the poems and plays. That is the voice, is the mind, is the heart, is the enthusiasm behind the plays, in each of which he seems to shake a lance. And some people have taken that and say, seems to shake a lance. Shake a spear? Seems to be Shakespeare. Not really, though. It's somebody else. Idiots. In each of which he seems to shake a lance, as brandished at the eyes of ignorance. Sweet Swan of Avon. Nobody called Francis Bacon the Sweet Swan of Avon. Francis Bacon is one of those people say was the real author of the plays. Nobody called which one was he? 17th Earl of Oxford, Edward de Vere, the Sweet Swan of Avon. Shakespeare was the only one that was called the Sweet Swan of Avon. What a sight it were to see thee in our waters yet appear. In other words, to see Shakespeare kind of come down the Thames and make those flights upon the banks of Thames that so did take Eliza and our gems. You know, it has to rhyme. You don't say Thames and James because it's not pronounced Thames. But stay, I see thee in the hemisphere advanced. So he doesn't see Shakespeare coming down the Thames. He sees him in the hemisphere advanced. Why? He's done something to Shakespeare that many poets do to those that they are praising. He has it's either apotheosized or, hold on, I gotta write this out to see which one it is. It's apotheosized. He's turned Shakespeare into a god. He's made him godlike. He's taken him up to the stars and stuff, okay? To shine down on England. I see thee in the hemisphere advanced and made a constellation there. Shine forth, thou star of poets. Star of poets. Shakespeare will now be the enthuser. Shakespeare will now be the muse of poets. Right? And with rage or influence, chide or cheer the drooping stage. Why does he call it the drooping stage? Okay, Shakespeare died in 1616. This is published in 1623. But Shakespeare had stopped writing long before 1660. Shakespeare had stopped writing in 1612. Okay? So Shakespeare hasn't been around for 11 years to write new plays for London. So what's he saying?
The stage is sad to not have more Shakespeare.
Stage is sad to not have more Shakespeare? Why else is it drooping? It's wilted. It doesn't have water. It doesn't have Shakespeare giving it life. And that's really true. Okay? Read plays written in the late 16 teens, in the 1620s, in the 1630s. Well, frankly, read plays from the Elizabethan period that aren't Shakespeare's, and they can't hold a candle to it. I mean, Jonson about, his best plays, Every Man in His Humor or Volpone or The Fox, they're just, notwithstanding what Dr. Kevin Donovan would say, they're no good compared to Shakespeare. Shakespeare's like up here, and all those other Elizabethan playwrights are down here. Okay? And Jonson knew that. And he was jealous of Shakespeare. Shine forth, thou star of poets, and with rage or influence chide or cheer the drooping stage, which, since thy flight from hence, hath mourned like night, and despairs day. Why does it despair day? When were plays performed? During the day. They didn't have artificial nighttime lighting. Okay? You go to the Globe today, they try to light that sucker up just with, torches. Lighting's not good enough, all right? But for thy volumes light. They despair the day except for what light Shakespeare's plays gives to the stage. Okay? All right, turn from Jonson and go to George Herbert, who should be right after Donne. Nope, John Webster, Duchess of Malfi. 7 what? Okay, I've got these out of order.
Yeah, that's not in your version.
In the second edition, it's on 761. It comes after Robert Herrick, if that's helpful. Now, George Herbert, like Donne, was an Anglican priest. Okay? In fact, you're going to see 3 of the writers that we will read, 2 of the writers we'll discuss today, were Anglican priests. George Herbert was a priest, Robert Herrick was a priest, and Donne was a priest. Herbert, however, is different from Herrick and Donne in that Herbert only writes devotional poetry. He only writes poetry about God or about the soul's relationship with God. Donne and Herrick write about profane or secular stuff as well, largely erotic poetry for Donne and some really erotic poetry for Herrick. I don't think they have his one really suggestive poem. Argument of his book, Delight and Disorder, Farewell to Sec, Corinne is going to Maine. No, they don't. For the last poem that's by Herrick in your book, on just opposite the introduction to Herbert, page 758, Upon Julia's Clothes. I don't remember if any of the biographies talk about who Julia was, but Herrick writes a bunch of poems on Julia's breasts. I don't mean he literally writes on her breasts. He writes about her breasts. Okay? Just, you have to be clear about things. But George Herbert doesn't do that. Okay? Herbert only writes about God, largely. So let's look at a couple of these poems by Herbert. Actually, not a couple, 6. The first one, The Altar, on page 760 in mine. Okay? And The Altar is a particular kind of poem you've probably heard about in other classes. It's a shape poem. I don't remember some of the other phrases they give for it. But The Altar is one of those, as is Easter Wings. And in the not 19th century, in the 20th century, in the 1930s, I think it was. I don't know if your introduction mentions. A handwritten copy of George Herbert's manuscript, The Temple, was discovered. So prior to then, all the editions had been based upon the earlier printed editions, and then when this handwritten manuscript was discovered, editors started to follow that, and that showed exactly how Herbert wanted, for example, these poems laid out on the page, like Easter Wings. Often what editors will do with this poem is they'll print it so that the wings go like this. Okay? That's upside down, according to what Herbert wants. So, The Altar. A broken altar, Lord, thy servant rears, made of a heart and cemented with tears. Okay? A humble and contrite heart, O God, thou wilt not despise. I'm pretty sure is what Psalm 51:17 is referring to, the footnote down at the bottom. Whose parts are as thy hand did frame, no workman's tool hath touched the same. Why? Because he's talking about the passage there in Exodus where it says, don't frame, don't construct a altar made of hand. Just take the stone, pile them up, but don't shape the stone at all. A heart alone is such a stone as nothing but thy power doth cut. So what's he saying about the human heart? It's hard. It's impenetrable. Okay? Wherefore each part of my hard heart meets in this frame to praise thy name. Why? Because each part, he says, of his hard heart is one of the stones that is making up this altar. So what's he calling on God to do? Break this altar. Break this stony heart. That if I chance to hold my peace, these stones to praise thee may not cease. Okay, and you got a gloss there, Luke 19:40. Oh, let thy blessed sacrifice be mine, and sanctify this altar to be thine. That is, let your sacrifice be mine, let the sacrifice be for me, and let me be sacrificed, and sanctify this altar. Well, what's the altar? His heart. Okay, to be thine. That is, let my heart be the altar that Christ is crucified on, so to speak. All right? Turn to Easter wings, which means you also have to turn your book upside down, or right side. Now, notice what he does in this poem. You start off large, then you get really small, then you grow large again. Then you stay large, and you grow really small, and then you get large again. The reason is that the form or shape of the poem matches the thematic content of the poem. Lord, who createdst man in wealth and store. Wealth and store means great abundance. Though foolishly he lost the same. What happens? The line gets a little smaller. He loses some of the wealth and store. Decaying more and more, the line gets shorter, till he became, even shorter, most poor. 2 syllables. With thee. Notice, most poor is joined to with thee. All right? Oh, let me rise. Line gets longer. Why? Because the person that was most poor, or the soul that was most poor, lying on the ground, now rises. It gets larger. As larks harmoniously, and sing this day thy victories. Well, what day is it? Easter wings. Okay? So, man who was created in wealth and store became most poor, meaning dead. But when man being dead is tied together with Christ, who also became dead, then what happens on Easter? Rises. All right? Then shall the fall further the flight in me. That is, enable me to rise even more. My tender age and sorrow did begin. What's he talking about? Original sin. Okay? My tender age and sorrow did begin, and still with sicknesses and shame, thou didst so punish sin. That is, sicknesses and shame were God's chastisements for sin. That I became, as a result of the sickness and shame, most thin. All right? Most thin, dead-like. With thee, now joined with Christ, let me combine and feel this day thy victory. For if I imp my wing on thine, and you've got a gloss that talks about what it means by imping thy wing, sticking additional feathers in a falcon's wing to enable it to fly better. He's saying, if I graft myself onto you, okay, affliction shall advance the flight in me. Affliction, okay, will help me to fly even better. Very similar to what Dunn talks about in Meditation 17. That affliction, in the nature of it, is bullion, Dunn says. All right? Back up for just one moment, though. What he's talking about when he says, the fall shall further the flight in me, and we're going to see this with another poem, he's going to talk about the Felix Peccatum, the fortunate or happy fall. Fortunate fall, or the happy fall. That is, and this is an idea that, like original sin, came from St. Augustine. The idea that, man, we are really lucky that Adam and Eve screwed up in the Garden of Eden. Because if Adam and Eve had never screwed up in the Garden of Eden, Jesus never would have come. God never would have become man. Okay, is what St. Augustine suggested. St. Augustine is unique in holding that idea in terms of the early church fathers. Most of the early church fathers don't say anything like that. Okay? They essentially say, no, it was part of the plan from the beginning for God to become man. Okay, go from Easter wings to, make sure I've got the right one, Prayer 1, which in the second edition is on page 762. I don't want to talk about this one. I just want to read it and make this one statement. Look at what he's saying about prayer. Nothing. He's not saying anything about prayer. All he's merely doing is saying, this is prayer, or prayer is the church's banquet, angel's age, God's breath, and man returning to his birth. The soul in paraphrase, heart in pilgrimage, the Christian plummet sounding heaven and earth, engine against the Almighty, sinner's tower, reversed thunder, Christ's sides piercing spear, the 6 days world transposing in an hour, a kind of tune which all things hear and fear, softness and peace and joy and love and bliss, exalted manna, gladness of the best, heaven in ordinary, man well dressed, the Milky Way, the bird of paradise, church bells beyond the stars heard, the soul's blood, the land of spices, something understood. I mean, let that perk for a while. It's pretty beautiful when you think about it. Whether you're talking about prayer to, as he is, prayer to the Christian God, or, meditation or getting in tune with whatever, okay? Notice, look at that language again. Reversed thunder. How can prayer be reversed thunder? Not standing at the door and knocking, but banging at the door. Okay, we didn't read one of Donne's poems that, if we have time, we'll come back to. His holy sonnet, Batter My Heart, Three-Person God. Okay, prayer 1. Now the caller. Go ahead, Madeline.
What is 6 days with transposing?
6 days world transposing in an hour. Okay, what's the 6 days world, first of all? 6 days of creation. Transposing in an hour.
So
What's it mean?
Occurring.
Occurring, happening in an hour? A prayer of an hour? Okay. In the Catholic Church, in the medieval church, and in the Anglican Church, you have what are called the prayers of the hours. Because David says, 7 times a day will I call upon thee, O Lord. So you have the hours of prayers. So you have first hour, third hour, 6th hour, 9th hour, Vespers, Compline, and Matins. Okay? Matins is the first one. It's, depending on which tradition you're in, it could be 3 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning. Okay? And it could be that what he's suggesting there, by 6 days world transposing in an hour, the 6 days of creation corresponding to prayer. Okay? You have God say, let there be, and then that happens, and God saw that it was good. Okay? So what he's doing is he's transposing, turning, changing the world of creation, the 6-day period of creation, into an hour of prayer. Possibly. Okay? Now, the caller. On whatever page it's on. It's not on that page. 766 in the second edition. I struck the board and cried, no more, I will abroad. Is that how that should sound? No. It should sound like, I struck the board and cried, no more. I will abroad. What does he mean? Louder, Madeline.
I'm leaving.
I'm leaving. I'm out of here. I'm done. Finis. That's it. Over. I will abroad. Taking the next flight. What? Shall I ever sigh and pine? My lines and life are free. Free as the road. You know, Jack Kerouac's walking on down the... Loose as the wind, as large as store. Shall I be still in suit? Your gloss tells you, in suit, in attendance. Well, okay, that is one meaning. It can also mean in suit, waiting upon somebody. Okay? Have I no harvest but a thorn to let me blood, and not restore what I have lost with cordial fruit? That is, isn't there anything more for me? Sure there was wine before my sighs did dry it. What's that an example of? Not the pause before the it. Petrarchan Convention. Okay? Sure there was wine before my sighs did dry it. Channeling, Bottom in the Rude Mechanicals from Midsummer Night's Dream by not keeping my points. Before my tears did drown it. Is the year only lost to me? Have I no bays to crown it? That is laurel wreaths, no victor's rewards, no flowers, no garlands gay, all blasted, all wasted. That is my whole year worthless? Everything I've been doing for the past year? Not so, my heart. Madeline?
So that's how I feel about it.
Yeah. I'm sure those of you who are graduating this semester are probably like, just let it be over.
That is an accurate statement.
That's how I was when I got my BA, my MA, and my PhD. Because that PhD was piled high deeper than everything you can imagine. Not so, my heart, but there is fruit, and thou hast hands. What does that mean? There is fruit, and thou hast hands. Louder. Talk about it. There it is. Go eat it. What fruit? Forbidden fruit. Okay? What's he been talking about? How has the speaker spent the last year of his life? Waiting upon somebody else, suiting somebody else, attending somebody else. And what's the speaker saying? Have I wasted all my time? No. Is all my life over? No. Look, there's fruit. And you have hands. Pluck the fruit. Recover all thy sigh-blown age on double pleasures. Why double pleasures? Make up for lost time. It's like, you hear stories, somebody finds out they're going to die in 6 months, and what do they say they're going to do? They're going to make up for the 30 years they thought they had coming, and they're going to live that 30 years in 3 months or 6 months. Last fall, I was driving into school and heard a story on the radio. Some poor slob in Australia, I think it was. Guy had been to the doctor. No, it was the UK, because, National Health Service. The guy had been to the doctor, and the doctor told him, you have interminable cancer. You're going to be dead within 3 months. And so he goes and takes out a bunch of credit cards, with like 10 grand maxes on them, and just maxes them out. Takes a cruise around the world, buys all this kind of stuff. He gets back from the cruise to have a notice from the National Health Service telling him, oops, wrong results. They weren't yours. They were, Jane Smith's rather than John Smith's or something like that. And so he was suing the government, because after all, he wouldn't have, charged up all this stuff if he'd known he wasn't going to die. Okay?
So what was the outcome?
I don't remember how it ended up, but I imagine he has some pretty healthy.
All that debt for his family.
Yeah, he would have left all that debt for his family. Nice guy. So, recover all thy sigh-blown age on double pleasures. Leave thy cold dispute of what is fit and not. What does he mean, thy cold dispute of what is fit and not? Louder. Say it. That's not what you said. Anybody?
Stop narking them or like tagging on what's proper.
Yes. Okay? What is right and what is not right. But notice he says it is a cold dispute. Why? Starshield?
Well, it's going on today. I mean, that's the big fight, I think, in this country today is this side thinks they're right and this side thinks they're right. Nobody will come to, nobody, it's
Okay.
everything going on now. And it's a cold dispute. It's like there's no winner.
It's cold because it's not informed by the heart.
Yeah.
It's solely a mind thing. Oh, if you do this, you're going to get in trouble, and God's going to, zap you, kind of a thing. Right? That's what he means by a cold dispute. It's entirely rational. All right? Forsake thy cage, thy rope of sands. How good would a rope of sand be? I think Connie gave it away. She just laughed. Thy rope of sands which petty thoughts have made, and made to thee good cable, to enforce and draw and be thy law. Notice, thy cage, thy rope of sands, which petty thoughts have made. What's petty mean? Small. Your petty thoughts have made this rope of sand. So what kind of small thoughts?
It's insignificant.
Okay, but what kind? I mean, yeah, they're small, they're insignificant, they're tiny, they're little. We can get all kinds of adjectives for that. What kind of thoughts? Your rules. Your personal, internal, moral compass. Okay? Your petty thoughts have made these, and they've made the rope of sands into good cable. Now, he doesn't mean cable like if you ride a bike, a little 1/4 inch bike cable. What does he mean by cable? He means the kind of cable that is used when you tie up a ship in port, or the kind of cable that is used to be attached to an anchor. Right? If you've ever been on a large ship, I mean like like the Queen Mary II or anything like that, okay? I mean a big ship. The cable that is used to moor the boat can be this big in diameter. That is, the rope can be 6 feet in diameter. You don't just have somebody pick that up, They're too heavy. They have to be, let out and brought back in by machine. Okay? In Herbert's day, obviously, they weren't that large, but they were still a foot in diameter. So what has happened? That rope of sands created by the mind has turned into this big, massive cable that now ties him down.
That sounds like a burden of time.
Well, possibly that too. To enforce and draw and be thy law, what? While thou didst wink and wouldst not see. And your gloss tells you, wink, shut one's eyes. Really? Boy, that is a helpful gloss, isn't it? Because I'm sure nobody knows what winking means. What does he really mean? While thou didst wink and wouldst not see. Wink at what? Wouldst not see what? And wouldst not, bear in mind, means desires not to or wishes not to. How about, oh look, there's fruit. He's not talking about literal fruit. There is temptation. There is sin. If it's a male speaker, she's hot. If it's a female speaker, he's gorgeous, Whatever way you want to put it. And what does he do? Thou didst wink. No, can't look at that. So what does he do? Notice, he doesn't close his eyes. He winks. Because what happens when you wink or blink? Yeah, your eyes open back and you still see everything. Okay? Away. Take heed. In other words, pay attention to yourself. I will abroad. Call in thy death's head. What's a death's head? A skull. Thank you. It's exactly what it is. It is a memento mori, a reminder of death. It's very typical in Renaissance portraiture, especially if the person having their portrait done is a scholar. Okay, to have them, standing or sitting, and they look all, regal and everything. Somewhere in the portrait there will be a skull, because usually the portrait of the person is done when the person is young and strong and virile and everything, and that skull's there to remind them. This is what your youth and virility and strength will get you. It's the reason why you have the gravedigger scene in Hamlet. Okay? The gravediggers are throwing up these skulls, and Yorick's skull comes up. It's to remind the audience, yeah, Hamlet's young and hot now, but he won't be for long. And that's why the entire play focuses on death and corruption. Call in, put that thing away. I'm tired of looking at that. That's what he means. Tie up thy fears. He that forbears to suit and serve his need deserves his load. If you don't get what you want out of life, then you deserve what you get. If life is a carousel and you don't reach for that brass ring, then you deserve getting stuck on that stupid little plastic hippo that doesn't do anything but goes around in circles. Okay? What does the speaker seem to be saying? You only go around once. Go for the gusto. Miller Beer, I think, used to have, go for the gusto. Grab the gusto. Okay? It's like the bumper sticker. He who dies with the most toys wins. Right? But as I raved and grew more fierce and wild at every word, methoughts I heard one calling, Child. And I replied, My Lord. Yes, God. Okay. So, the caller. Notice the title is spelled C-O-L-L-A-R. Like, heal. But what else is it? Priest caller.
And a caller,
Somebody calling. Child. Oh, not now, please. I'm getting ready to go pluck the fruit, Heal. Stop. Don't do it. All right? Now look at the pulley. When God at first made man, having a glass of blessings standing by, let us, said he. Notice, let us, said he. Well, us is plural, he is singular. Why? Trinitarian God. Okay. Said he, but one God. Let us pour on him all we can. Let the world's riches, which dispersed lie, contract into a span. Well, what does he mean by a span? A human body, a human person. So strength first made a way. So what's God do? God gets his bottle of blessings. It's not Deer Park, it's, God's paradise or something. And he pours it in. And then beauty flowed, and then wisdom, then honor, pleasure. And when almost all was out, God made a stay. He stopped. Nothing else pours. Perceiving that alone of all his treasure, rest in the bottom lay. He doesn't mean what is in the bottom of the bottle is the rest. He means rest, contentment, satisfaction is what lays in the bottle. For if I should, said he, bestow this jewel also on my creature, he would adorn my gifts instead of me, and rest in nature, not the God of nature. So both should losers be. So God gives him everything, but not rest. Let him keep the rest. Well, what's the rest? Strength, beauty, wisdom, honor, pleasure, all the things God already poured. Notice God doesn't take any of that back. Let him keep the rest, but keep them with repining restlessness. Repining, fretful. How about anxious or dissatisfied? Okay? Restlessness. Let him be rich and weary. That at least if goodness lead him not, yet weariness may toss him to my breast. St. Augustine said that everybody has a God-sized hole. And what people attempt to do is they attempt to fill that hole with all kinds of things. But the only thing that will fit the hole is God. And when he says that in his confession because he talks about how he used to try to fill the hole. Because he was a pretty raunchy guy before he was converted. Pretty much slept with whatever moved. All right? And he says people attempt to fill that hole with all different kinds of gods. Whether it's sex, or money, or technology, or writing papers, or... there might be a weird one out there, I don't know. Okay? So he says, maybe that lack of rest. What Bono sings about, U2 sings about in, I still haven't found what I'm looking for. It's that idea, all right? Maybe that will toss him to my breast. Okay, last one of Herbert. Love 3, page 769 in the second edition. Love bade me welcome, yet my soul drew back, guilty of dust and sin. So notice what those first two lines tell us. What does love do? Love is being personified, obviously.
It's welcoming.
Love standing at the door saying, come on in. And what does the speaker do? No. Why? Because I'm guilty of dust and sin. But quick-eyed love, meaning perceiving instantly, observing me grow slack from my first entrance in, drew nearer to me, sweetly questioning. Okay? Notice, my soul drew back, but in the next two lines, the soul does enter. But what happens? The soul enters and kind of starts to grow slack and weak. And love draws near. Okay? Why? Because love perceives quickly that the soul is kind of wilting. Love draws near and sweetly questions if I lack anything. Like you go into a store and a salesperson comes up and says, can I help you? Okay. But here is love coming up and saying, do you need anything? What can I get for you? Would you like a beer? Would you like... It's my kind of love. A guest, I answered, worthy to be here. What's the speaker suggesting about the speaker's self? I'm not worthy. Love said, you shall be he. You shall be worthy. I, the unkind, ungrateful. Okay, now notice what the speaker has been doing thus far from the beginning. And what love has been doing. Love is standing there saying, come on, come in. And what's the speaker doing? Nah, not me. I'm too bad. I'm rotten. I'm sinful. I'm evil. And love's sitting there going, would you get your sorry look? Love keeps saying, come in. I, the unkind, ungrateful. Ah, my dear, I cannot look on thee. Love, I cannot look on you. And so what does love do? Love took my hand and smiling did reply, who made the eyes but I? What do you mean you can't look at me? I made those eyes. They can look at me. That's what love is saying. But what is love really saying to the speaker's soul? Who do you think you are? That you have so much more sin than I can forgive. Truth, Lord. That is, yeah, right, you did. Truth, Lord, but I have marred them. Let my shame go where it doth deserve. Oh, send me to hell, because that's what I deserve, God, because I'm just a rotten old sinner. And know you not, says love, who bore the blame? Notice, love doesn't say, no, you're not guilty. You're just misunderstood. You just had an unhappy childhood and weren't raised properly and were poorly fed. No. What does love say? You're right. You're right. You did mar your eyes. You are sinful. You are rotten. But who bore the blame? Your back isn't covered with scars. Your hands don't have holes in them. And so what does the speaker say? Well, then let me serve you. Okay, St. Peter. Because that's the image. You know? Night before his crucifixion, what does Christ do? He gets down to wash the disciples' feet. And what does Peter? No, you're not going to wash my feet. You know, Jesus has to say, Peter, shut up. He's doing that all the time, by the way. Peter, shut up, you know. Yeah, calm down. Get the Ritalin. Okay. You just have to wonder, you know, if the pharmacology were as advanced back then as it is now, you know, what kind of saints we would have today, people. You must sit down, says love, and taste my meat. So I did sit and eat. Well, what's he talking about? Communion, the wedding feast of the Lamb. Okay, that's what the speaker is talking about. All right? All right, now turn from there to Robert Herrick. This will be a welcome break. Herrick, as I said, was also an Anglican priest. Okay? But he doesn't only write about religion and devotion and love of God and such. Okay? He writes about a variety of things. If you're curious about that one poem that I was referring to, if I remember right, I think it's called The Stock. Look it up on Google.
You said he's an Anglican priest as well.
Yes, he was an Anglican priest as well. He was an Anglican priest off like in Woodbury, and he wanted to be in D.C. And he couldn't get switched. So the argument of his book, he's going to tell us what he writes about. I sing of brooks, of blossoms, birds and bowers, of April, May, of June, and July flowers. In other words, what's he write about? Happy stuff. Okay? Springtime and early summer. I sing of maypoles, hawk carts, wassails, wakes. of bridegrooms, brides, and of their bridal cakes. I write of youth, of love, and have access by these to sing of cleanly wantonness. Notice your gloss, cleanly, innocent. Another translation for that, or another gloss for that, would be chaste wantonness. It kind of is, but it's not. It's chaste within marriage, wantonness. In other words, within marriage, have at it. Whatever you want to do, go for it. Okay? Just not outside marriage. I write of youth, of love, and have access by these to sing of cleanly wantonness. I sing of dews, of rains, and piece by piece, of balm, of oil, of spice, and ambergris, which your gloss tells you, waxy secretion produced by sperm whales used in making perfume, and very valuable, extremely valuable. A guy found, where was this? New Zealand. Last year, walking along the beach, found a big old chunk of ambergris that washed ashore and sold it at auction, if I remember right, for something like $100,000. Okay? Waxy secretion produced by sperm whales. First of all, ew. Put on the rubber gloves because I don't want to touch that. Okay? But it's used in making expensive perfume. I sing of times trans-shifting. And I write how roses first came red and lilies white. I write of groves, of twilights, and I sing the court of Mab, that is the fairy queen. And of the fairy king, I write of hell. Notice, I write, all the earlier things, most of them are I sing, but I write of love, youth, love, and have access. I write of groves, I write of hell. I sing and ever shall of heaven, and hope to have it after all. Let's see, do we have time? Let's see, we've got 1, 2 more. Yeah. His farewell to sack. Who knows what sack is?
Wine.
Close, but not close enough.
Wine.
What kind of wine?
Cheap.
Cheap wine.
Oh, like a box
There's some good box wine.
There are some good box wines.
though.
This is the kind of wine you get on a 5-gallon jug for $1.99. You know,
Oh, it's
it's got it's been aging since yesterday afternoon. It's really cheap wine. If you're familiar with the Henry plays by Shakespeare, it's what Falstaff is always drinking. In fact, at the Great Battle of Shrewsbury, Falstaff pulls out of his holster a little bottle of sack. Okay. So, farewell, thou thing, time past so known, so dear to me as blood to life in spirit. Okay, so how near are blood to life in spirit?
pretty essential.
Pretty essential. If you lack blood, you don't have life or spirit. So how important is sack? Near, nay, thou more near than kindred. Friend, man, wife, male to the female, soul to body, life to quick action, or the warm, soft side of the resigning yet resisting bride. It's pretty important. The kiss of virgins, first fruits of the bed, soft speech, smooth touch, the lips, the maidenhead. These and 1,000 sweets could never be so near or dear as thou wast once to me. Wow. He needs to get to his AA meeting really fast. You know? O thou, the drink of gods and angels. What exactly is the drink of gods?
Ambrosia.
Nectar or ambrosia. It's not sack. Okay? If it were going to be alcohol, it'd be a $5,000 bottle of champagne or a $5,000 bottle of scotch or something like that, but not sack. Wine, thou scatterest spirit and lust, whose purest shine more radiant than the summer sunbeam shows, each way illustrious brave. Well, wine can make the purest shine more radiant than the summer sunbeam shows, right? You've probably seen friends who have shone in this way. Their face just takes on a whole new otherworldly kind of glow. And like to those comets we see by night, whose shagged portents foretell the coming of some dire events, or some full flame which with a pride aspires, throwing about his wild and active fires. 'Tis thou, above nectar. O divinest soul, eternal in thyself, that canst control that which subverts whole nature. Notice, sack controls itself. But what does it do to us? Subverts entire nature. Grief and care, vexation of the mind, and damned despair. 'Tis thou alone who with thy mystic fan works more than wisdom, art, or nature can to rouse the sacred madness and awake the frost-bound blood and spirits, and to make them frantic with thy raptures flashing through the soul like lightning. Pull up something real quickly. And as active too. 'Tis not Apollo can, or those thrice three Castilian sisters sing, the 9 muses in Greek mythology. Okay. If wanting thee, Horace and Anacreon both had lost their fame, hadst thou not filled them with thy fire and flame. Notice what your gloss says. Horace, Roman poet noted for his satires and odes, Anacreon, Greek lyric poet, celebrated for his drinking songs. What he is saying is, if it hadn't been for sack, and he's not talking here about literal sack, he's talking about all alcoholic drink, we wouldn't have our great poets today. Okay? Let's see if I can find one song real quickly. It's a whiskey song, but I can't find it. Pardon?
Rat Paisley?
No.
That's depressing.
Of which, and the Thespian spring, of which sweet swans must drink before they sing, their true paced numbers and their holy lays, which makes them worthy cedar and the bays. But why? Why longer do I gaze upon, lost my place, thee with the eye of admiration, since I must leave thee, and enforced must say to all thy witching beauties, go away. He's finally realized, I don't control it. But if thy whimpering looks do ask me why, just think about that line for a moment. He's sitting there, he's writing, he's got a bottle of booze on his desk, and he describes the booze as whimpering. Like, come, please, take me, drink me, tip me over, To all, but if thy whimpering looks do ask me why, then know that nature bids thee go. Not I. It's not the me that inhabits this body that says, be gone, foul thing. No. 'Tis her erroneous self has made a brain incapable of such a sovereign as is thy powerful self. He's saying, I'm a lightweight. I can't handle you. Prithee not smile. The bottle is smiling at him. Maybe he's already been, tipping in the till.
Got a couple bottles already.
Yeah. Prithee not smile, or smile more inly, lest thy looks beguile my vows denounced in zeal. Thy looks beguile my vows denounced in zeal. Quit smiling at me, or I will have to teach you a lesson. Drink you. Which thus much show thee, that I have sworn but by thy looks to know thee. Let others drink thee freely, and desire thee and their lips espoused, while I admire and love thee, but not taste thee. Let my muse fail of thy former helps, and only use her inadulterate strength. What's done by me hereafter shall smell of the lamp, not thee. I don't remember if this is the song or not. I'll turn this up. This is by a Scottish folk singer named Dougie MacLean. It's titled Farewell to Whiskey. We've got a couple minutes. I won't play all of it. Because I have to do 2 more. Come on, get to the... Nope, sorry, this isn't it. Yeah. That's why it's... It wasn't the one I was thinking of. Okay, to the virgins to make much of time. Which I'm going to do very quickly so we can get to Andrew Marvell. This is, along with Marvell's poem that we're going to discuss, one of the 2 premier, preeminent Carpe Diem poems of all English literature. Okay? Carpe Diem means, if you saw Dead Poets Society, seize the day. Latin phrase. All right? It means use your time while you can. Because tomorrow morning you're going to wake up and you're going to be 75 years old. Or it will seem like it. Gather ye rosebuds while ye may. This is to the virgins to make much of time. Gather ye rosebuds while ye may. Old time is still a-flying. And this same flower that smiles today, tomorrow will be dying. All right? So what's he mean? Use it well while you got it. The glorious lamp of heaven, the sun, the higher he's a-getting, the sooner will his race be run, and nearer he's to setting. Sun rises from the east, what's he saying? As soon as the sun reaches the meridian,
It's all done.
most of you guys are still on this track. I'm down here. Okay? That's what he means. That's what he means. Dante says, midway through this life's journey, he found himself in a dark valley, right? What most scholars suggest that mean is Dante is taking the Old Testament psalmist saying that the days of man are 70. So midway through this life's journey, 35. It's coming up quicker than you know, man. Once you hit 35, and it's not a nice little easy arc like this. Okay. Think of this as a nice gentle climb. This, it's like a slide. That age is best which is the first, when youth and blood are warmer. But being spent, the worse and worse times still succeed the former. Remember the discussion we had earlier about bacon grease? When it's hot, you're frying that bacon and that grease is popping all over it, all nice and fluid, and then you go back a couple hours later. That's what my blood's like. Congealed, hardened, solid. It's when you're young that it's hot and really rushing. So be not coy. Use your time, and while ye may go marry. For having lost but once your prime, ye may forever tarry. Is this poem directed at women? I heard a yes. Yes, no, maybe. Why do you think it's directed at women? If you do, Jacqueline. Okay. Why else? There is one word that's a pretty good giveaway that it's directed to women. Coy. We don't describe, usually, in English, men as being coy. Coy is an adjective that describes women more than men. To the virgins to make much of time, could be male virgin as well as female virgin. That doesn't give it away. Okay? But that coy part is a pretty dead giveaway that it's directed to women. Now turn to Andrew Marvell. With the 3 minutes we have left. Page 775 on the second edition. Okay. Marvell, real briefly, Marvell was John Milton's secretary. Marvell kept Milton from being thrown in prison at the time of the Restoration when Charles II came back to rule England. So this is the other great Carpe Diem poem. Notice this one is divided into 3 stanzas. Okay? The first stanza sets up a premise, the second stanza sets up a premise, and the third stanza kind of gives us a conclusion. You can leave it, Gregory. So, had we but world enough and time. What is the first stanza starting with? Louder.
If we had unlimited time.
If we had unlimited time and the world didn't die. So notice it begins with what kind of question? Had we but world enough and time? It's what's called a subjunctive. Because what's the problem? We don't. We definitely don't have enough time. Okay? This coyness lady were no crime. See, she's described as being coy. So what would we do if we had enough world and time? We would sit down and think which way to walk and pass our long-loved day. You probably remember sometime when you were a little kid, sitting around with a friend, summertime, you don't have anything to do, and you go, well, what do you want to do? I don't know, what do you want to do? And you waste the whole stinking day not knowing what to do. So what does he do? In the first stanza, he talks about what they would do. I'm going to skip a few lines. He says, I would love you 10 years before the flood. That's Noah's flood. Okay? And you should, if you choose, refuse till the conversion of the Jews. Well, when's that? The end of time. So from 10 years before the flood until the return of Christ, you could sit there and refuse me. My vegetable love should grow faster than empires. Vegetable only refers to slow growing, right? And more slow. And he's going to give us an idea of how slow. He would take 100 years to praise her eyes. Okay. 100 years for her eyes. And on thy forehead. So eyes and forehead. And then what? 200 to adore each breast, because apparently they're really good. So 200 times 2 for her breasts. So now we're up to a total of 500 years. But 30,000 to the rest. Well, what does he mean by to the rest? Keep heading south.
Yeah.
That's what he means. So keep heading south is worth a whole lot more than her breasts and eyes. 30,000 years as opposed to 500. And age at least to every part. For lady, you deserve this state, nor would I love at lower rate. What does he mean by rate? Honey, you're worth at least $20. Okay, 50. That's what he means. It's economic language. I know I'm late. Second stanza. But at my back I always hear time's winged chariot hurrying near. Why? Because time's following. So what does he get to at this stanza? The main point. In the future, worms shall try that long-preserved virginity, and your quaint honor turn to dust, and into ashes all my lust. Okay? Worms will try your virginity. If you die a virgin, then worms will go where you wouldn't let me go. Yeah. Oh, perfect reaction. This is like a first, Your quaint honor. That word, quaint, we talked about, oh yeah, Madeline remembers Chaucer, when Henry Nicholas grabs her by the quainta. That honor shall turn to dust. Okay? So, now, therefore, while the youthful glue sits on thy skin like morning dew, blah, 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 blah. What is she doing according to the speaker?
Refusing.
She's refusing, she's holding out, but what else? And while thy willing soul transpires at every pore with instant fires. Come on, you want me. I know you want me. You're putting out pheromones like crazy. That's what he's saying. Now let us sport us while we may. How can they sport themselves? Like amorous birds of prey. Let's wrap up in a ball. Well, it was a medieval and Renaissance idea that birds of prey would mate by flying up about a mile into the sky, and then the male would mount the female, and they would stop flying. And do what? Fall. And they better finish before splat. That's what he means. Okay? So let's tear our pleasures with rough strife. No, he's not talking S&M. I've had people ask that. Through the iron gates of life. And do what? Though we cannot make our son stand still, yet we'll make him run. Meaning, we'll give the son a run for his money. We'll make him work hard. All right. See you on the 7th. Exam will be just like the last one. It will cover everything since the previous exam.
I'm just saying, if you